You say you want the hype, but can you really handle the hype? A better question to ask is, should you buy into the hype for specific individuals across the college football landscape? Today, we're going to break down who is safe to buy into when it comes to hype train season. We got a lot of seasons going on right now. We got Drink the Kool-Aid season, which is a fun one right now. We're about to jump headfirst into fall camp season. If you're tuned into the social channels on the short form side, you're getting a sneak peek at prediction season. But prediction week will start next week on the hard count. Thursday, we will have our national champion for you. We'll have our conference champions for you. Throughout that week, we'll have a number of other record predictions, so make sure you're dialed in here. But welcome into the hard count, baby. We got a big day today. It's the biggest Wednesday of the week, Wednesday, July 24th, 2024, the last one on the face of the planet. And I'm just so glad to be here with y'all. It is a privilege and an honor and something I do not take for granted that we get to talk college football with y'all every single day. Today, we're talking hype, as I mentioned before. We are also going to take a look at what's going on out there in Columbus, Ohio, which we've done a few times throughout the course of this offseason. But I think right now during SEC Media Days, I'll backtrack. Big Ten Media Days, excuse me. We got SEC Media Days on the brain as we were there last week. During Big Ten Media Days, there's a lot of talk from folks within Ohio State saying, well, hey, it is win it all or bust. It is national title or bust. It is we got to beat Michigan, we got to do this and that. And, there's a lot of pressure at Ohio State. I think the pressure knob has actually turned up even a couple more notches than it typically would be out there. How are they handling that? And is how they're handling that the best practice to get to where they want to go? We got some thoughts there. What is the most interesting thing around Georgia right now? Because to be real with y'all, man, Georgia's kind of boring right now. And I don't say that as a slight to Georgia. If anything, it's a praise to them. There's not a whole lot of interesting things about them. Got the best coach in college football. I think if you ask most people, they would say they have the best quarterback in college football. They have one of, if not the best rosters in college football. They're the favorite to win the national championship. So what's the most interesting thing about Georgia? We'll unpack that together. And there's a funny thing that happens during this part of the year as well. When the games end, we all have our own opinions on the season that was and what those teams are going to be going forward into the upcoming season that at that point is light years away, it feels like. But throughout the course of the entire offseason, from the confetti dropping on last season to week 0 kicking off, our opinions start to change. We look more closely at things. We're college football sickos, so we search on YouTube full game rerun of insert whatever team you want to talk about there. A couple of teams have grown on me, y'all, throughout the course of this offseason. I'm going to tell you which ones those are a little bit later on in the show. But I'm so glad to have y'all here, man. This is truly, this is a blessing. This is a blessing and something I'm extremely, extremely grateful for to be able to do this with y'all. If you're new, welcome. It's college football every day. It's college football the way that you want it. No additives, no preservatives, no red 40, because I know that's a trendy thing right now on TikTok. No red 40. Unless we're using it as a snap count. But we're glad to have y'all dialed in. Make sure you're subscribed. And if you're on the podcast, man, God bless you. Because you're spending your time. You can't catch it live, but you're spending your time in the car or at the gym or whatever you're doing while you're listening to this show. And you're making time to make time for this show. If something matters to you, you make time. Every good coach will tell you that. So appreciate y'all making time for us. Appreciate this show mattering to you. So we mentioned all the things we're going to talk about here throughout the show, but let's start here, man. Who has the best odds to go undefeated? And when we say undefeated, as it pertains to how Vegas is drawing it up, I'm assuming with a fair degree of confidence that we're speaking to teams going undefeated during the regular season. So this isn't so much a national championship segment or a postseason record that we're factoring in here, but just from week 0 to the end of their season. Who has the best chance to go 12-0? And so we looked at the odds in Vegas, and when you look at the team that has the best odds to go 12-0 this season, according to the folks that build tall towers in the desert, it's not Georgia. It's not Ohio State. It's not Texas. It is the Liberty Flames at plus 260. And at first you see that, you're like, are you for real? What's going on out there at Liberty? Jamie Chadwell and co. Probably going to average somewhere in the neighborhood of 38 points a game, yet again with Caden Salter back at quarterback. But when you look at the schedule, it starts to make a little bit more sense. There is no big, bad FBS cash grab for them on the slate. You don't see a Michigan lurking out there, Virginia Tech lurking out there. Like, there's no game on the schedule where Liberty's going to show up, take a beating, get paid for it, go home. Like, that's not on the schedule. And now we were looking over the schedule before the show. They do have to play the Fighting Nick Breaks of Western Kentucky a little bit later in the year. So I'm just saying, Nick and I were talking. We'll see what happens when that game gets here. We'll talk about it. But right now, Liberty has the best odds to go undefeated. And as we sit here in mid to late July, like, I don't have a big issue with that being the betting favorite. Now, you start going further down this list and you see some more familiar brands. Ohio State is at plus 290 with the second best odds to go undefeated. They have a 3-game season, y'all. Like, could they drop another game somewhere along the way? Of course. But when you look at the roster talent matchups for them, it's 3 games. It's at Oregon, it's at Penn State, and it's Michigan. Now, that Michigan one obviously has a little bit of an extra punch packed along with it. But I think when we talk about Ohio State in 2024, we'll talk about them more later on in this live show. But, like, I truly believe that this operation, from an eye test perspective, from a gameplay perspective, will look different. And what I mean by that is we've seen Ohio State now for the better part of the last, call it 3 to 4 years, be an aerial assault. Like, they've always had, for the most part, one of, if not the best wide receivers in the country. Always, if not for the most part, have had one of the best, if not the best, quarterbacks in the country. That hasn't really been the case, I suppose, last year with Kyle McCord, but that's kind of been par for the course for Ryan Day and what he's had out there in Columbus. I'm not telling you that the quarterback play takes a massive step back. I'm not telling you that wide receiver play drops off the face of the earth. In fact, I feel pretty good about both those units. But when we look at Ohio State this year, it will be smash mouth. It will be mean. It will be bully ball. Now, the offensive line has to answer that call. But for those of y'all that have been playing college football 25 and you've seen what Quinshon Judkins can do on a football field in a video game, he's very much so like that in real life as well, for those of y'all that watched Ole Miss last year. So they have him. They have Travion Henderson. You also got a quarterback who's a big body, hard body, who can run the football downhill at you as well. Chip Kelly wants to make you say uncle. To be real now, I think that is the formula for success for Ohio State. So those 3 games now, they're going to have their work cut out for them. At Oregon, I think will be the best litmus test for us when it comes to Ohio State's national championship chops. I would not be surprised if Ohio State had to beat one of those 3 teams twice to win the Big Ten. Now, they very well could go undefeated. We'll give you our prediction next week on that, but Ohio State, second best odds to go undefeated in 2024. Then at number 3 for, I guess, our third best odds to go undefeated in 2024, you got Georgia. And Georgia, man, like, this schedule is brutal. People like to throw stones from a glass house at Georgia for the schedules they haven't had previously and say, oh, well, do they play anybody? Yeah, they're in the SEC. They hide under that SEC sticker, and then they just show up in the SEC title game, and they're a little bit more fresh because they've been feasting off of the lower-level SEC teams. No more divisions, y'all. If you're just now parachuting into the college football landscape, welcome. Things are a little bit weird in the SEC right now. You added Texas and Oklahoma. They're there now. And Georgia has to go to Texas October 19th. Before that, they play Clemson the first game of the year in Atlanta. I think they'll roll there, just so we're on the same page. But still, it's going to be a test for them to some respect. They're at Bama before that, after Clemson, before Texas. Then they're at Ole Miss. It's going to be a little bit of an uphill climb for Georgia. Now, we've said this many times. If you're a Georgia fan, the good news is you could probably drop 2 of those games and still find yourself in the college football playoff and have a little bit of extra motivation to go with it. But if they're going to go undefeated, Georgia will have to lean very heavily on Carson Beck. Now, Carson Beck understands that. We sat down with him at SEC Media Days, and he pointed to the Auburn game and said that was a turning point for him in his career and really last season, where he's like, okay, I am the guy. If we're going to get where we want to go, it starts right here with me, number 15. And so the fact that he understands that, the fact that he's more comfortable with that, I think that's a very good sign for Georgia fans in terms of how they're going to trend in 2024. You're not waiting for them to have it all come together. You might be looking for other position groups to gel with the offense. You know, obviously you got some new pieces at wide receiver. You got some new production kicking in on defense. But like at your most important position, you got a dude who knows he's a dude. And I'm excited to see what he ends up being. In those games where the roster talent level is comparable, all the games I mentioned, the at Bama, the at Texas, I think those are the games where Carson Beck has to differentiate for you. Take it a step further. The college football season is long. It's brutal. It's grueling. Sometimes you're dinged up. Sometimes, y'all, like we've seen this. I mean, this is why we love college football. Any given Saturday, you don't know what you're getting from your team. Now, Georgia has done as good, if not a better job than anybody else in the country in terms of being the same team or as close to the same team every single week from an intensity and execution standpoint. There's some days you just don't have it like you need to have it. In those days, on those games, you will ask Carson Beck to take over for you. Can he do that? If he can, consistently, Georgia will go undefeated. But we'll see if that ends up being the case. Now, right behind Georgia at plus 340 to go undefeated, you got Oregon. Dude, Oregon's going to be so fun. Can we just enjoy this for a second together, y'all? Like, I cannot help but smile ear to ear thinking about Oregon being in the Big Ten. And a part of me dies a little bit when I think about the Pac-12. I try kind of just to block that out. You know, you kind of try and smile to keep from crying, or laugh to keep from crying, I guess is the saying. They're going to have a lot of fun games for us to watch together, all right? They play Ohio State October 12th in Autzen. That's the one that's rocking. And you go to Michigan, I believe, a little bit later in the year. A lot made about the Pac-12 and the Oregon logo and what we have thought Oregon to be previously. If you've watched this show for any length of time, you know that we believe wholeheartedly Oregon is not finesse. Oregon is not your soft West Coast team. Don't let the flash unis fool you now. This is a team that will get after you. Not just from a pace of play standpoint, but from a in the trenches, in a phone booth, our big guys versus your big guys. They are a Big Ten team. Even before they put the Big Ten sticker on the helmet, they were a Big Ten team. And so when we look at Oregon going forward now, I think the advantage for them in the schedule, if you're trying to find a way to how they could go undefeated, is the fact that they get Ohio State and Michigan, their two toughest games, a little bit later in the year. You play both of them past October. As I already mentioned, Michigan in November, in October, you play Ohio State. The benefit of that is, yes, you probably have to find a way to have some stamina, and you have to be healthy. That's a big variable. But the thing that I love about that for Oregon is the fact that you give Dillon Gabriel a little bit of runway. Dillon Gabriel, as good a football player as I believe he's going to be for Oregon, I think it would be a little bit irresponsible for all of us to just assume that he's going to hit the ground running and will have no room for improvement through the first few weeks of the season. If that happens, phenomenal. More power to you. But the fact that he gets a little bit of time to figure it out early against the lesser competition for Oregon, that's massive. So when you play Ohio State in Autzen, the place is rocking, like, all right, we are literally in midseason form as we are in midseason. So that's phenomenal for Oregon. Plus 340. A little bit tempting. I'll be honest with you. A little bit tempting for your boy. Now, Notre Dame's at plus 450. They're behind Oregon in terms of odds to be undefeated. This makes a lot of sense. We've stood here and defended Notre Dame many a season and said they get knocked for being not in a conference, and they get knocked for not having the best schedule. And we've said many times, like, no, they play some good teams now. Don't knock Notre Dame. That's not the case this year. That's not. Now, how the schedule looks in July and how it looks in November could be very different. We could rewind the tape and say, actually, wow, Notre Dame kind of ran the gauntlet there. Those teams were a lot better than we thought they would be. However, there's 3 games that will be a good test for Notre Dame from a roster talent level. That's at A&M to start the year. That's Florida State. It's at USC. I think it is extra critical for Riley Leonard to be up to speed from the jump. Now, it's obvious because of what they have to do early on in the year, but what I'm trying to tell you is this team and this roster has so much around it. This is a Ferrari with an engine that you can rev and you can get rolling quick, fast, in a hurry. How is the driver? Right? You hear us make that metaphor a lot with quarterbacks and great rosters. Can Riley Leonard maximize this Ferrari? And the most important part of that is, like, yeah, he missed a bit of the spring. It's been dinged up. It's a new offense. And I'm not telling you that fall camp he can't get his legs under him and be rocking and rolling from the jump, but I do think it's worth noting, like, if you're not dialed in with this offense at the most important position, being the quarterback, like, that's going to lead to turnovers. And turnovers is how Notre Dame would lose games. Sounds simplistic, I know, but that's kind of the gist of it for me when I talk about Notre Dame. The good news, though, if you're a Notre Dame fan, as much as I tried to put a little bit of caution tape around Riley Leonard and him getting up to speed, you can probably lose 2 games, I think, is probably the number. 2 games. You feel better about only losing 1 game, but probably can go 10-2 and make the college football playoff. Vegas has Notre Dame at minus 170 to make the CFP. So now, again, remember, if you go undefeated, the best you can get is the 5 seed if you're the Irish. Even with that being the case, there's a lot of optimism, I think, with what they have on this roster and this path itself. All the teams I mentioned they have to play, the big 3 games. There's a path to them to being undefeated, without a doubt. Now, Utah, this is a tricky one. They're behind Notre Dame. They're at plus 490. They have, I think, the best roster in the most brutal conference, which is the Big 12. And when I say most brutal conference, I just mean like the degrees of separation from a talent level, from a Utah to a Kansas State, or a Utah to an Oklahoma State, or a Utah to an Arizona. I think Utah is more talented, but I don't think that the talent level, or the talent disparity rather, is that massive. They have a tough stretch early on in the year. They have a back-to-back at Oklahoma State and Arizona. Both those teams will be fresh. Utah, their edge is that they are the more physical outfit week in and week out. They won't be playing them late in the year where everyone's dinged up and they can kind of just impose their will. I think they'll still try to do that, but you go to Stillwater, Oklahoma, like, you better pack a lunch, bring your hard hat, and get ready to roll, because that's going to be a tough one. Oklahoma State also has some of the best returning production in the entire country. So, no Kansas State on the schedule, which you love to see. I feel a lot better about Utah going undefeated if I know without a shadow of a doubt that Cam Rising is going to be Cam Rising that we saw in previous years. Now, the flow is incredible. We are big fans of the flow here, all right? But even so, I want to make sure that he is got his knee where it needs to be. The flow is great. Is the knee as good as the flow? If it is, Utah could have a chance to go undefeated as well. Now, there's one more team I want to talk about here, because that was the, I believe that's the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 best odds to go undefeated. But the 7th best odds, I think, is where maybe the most value lies. And there's a big if here. But if Penn State and their new offensive coordinator, Coach Koldenecki, can unlock Drew Allar's potential, there's a lot of it now. We forget Drew Allar was a 5-star cat at one point in time coming out of high school. Drew Allar can sling the pill around the yard. If they can make that offense explosive, look at the schedule for Penn State, man. They're at plus 530. They got Ohio State on the schedule, and that's the only one that I see that you circle and say, yeah, probably a loss. And even then, if Penn State gets it rolling, and if they're a different version of Penn State's offense that they were previously, like, let's say Coach K turns the lights on for Drew Allar and he's balling, who knows? I'm just saying, who knows? They're at USC and they get Ohio State at home. I see a path there. Plus 530. Spend your money how you want to spend it, but plus 530, I think Penn State might be the sneakiest and potentially the highest value when it comes to betting on who could go undefeated in 2024. So we're tempted by a lot of that. Again, prediction week is next week on this show, live in living color. All 3 days that we're on the air live, we'll be talking some ball. I see a lot of flack in the chat. I hear you. But Penn State could be laughing if they're the ones that get that offense rolling, how they could get it rolling with a one Drew Allar and all his ability. So let me know who you would be betting on when it comes to who could be undefeated in 2024 in the regular season. Hey, big shouts to Nick Brake on the question today in the chat. If you're tuned in on YouTube, one of the many benefits of being tuned in on YouTube is the fact that you get to answer our daily poll that Nick Brake draws up for us. And I'm having trouble pulling it up here, but I believe the question is the best day, the best non-Saturday for college. Okay, here we go. Best non-Saturday college football game night. You got Tuesday, you got Wednesday, a little action. You got Thursday that's winning the poll right now. Nick and I were talking before the show, man. Friday's sneaky. Friday's a sneaky one. Friday will sneak up on you. And personally, I like Friday because it's a little bit of a early kick into the college football weekend. There's also usually some pretty good games on Friday. The ACC gets after it. Also, hand up, showing our bias here, the Ivy League plays on Friday night. I believe Cornell plays Harvard. I think it's at Sholkoff this year. So we play in Ithaca. We don't have to go to Boston this year, but it is what it is. So appreciate y'all answering that in the chat and making that whole thing go, man. So we prefaced the show with this, man. It's that time of the year where you will see hype trains running rampant. I would go so far as to say you will see a few hype trains falling off the rails. It's sad, but it's true. I don't want to speak so much to teams because we've talked about teams ad nauseum. I want to speak more specifically to individuals across the college football landscape. They're getting a lot of hype, getting a lot of attention, but I think for those guys, I think it's warranted. I think for some of these guys we're going to talk about right now, all these guys we're going to talk about right now, you can believe the hype for these dudes. And I'll start with this one, Jackson Dart. Quarterback at Ole Miss, what's the hype around him right now? Heisman Trophy dark horse, got the 6th best odds right now to win the Little Bronze Trophy when it's all said and done, according to Vegas. He mentioned it when we sat down with him at SEC Media Days. He was like, yeah, there's a lot of juice around Ole Miss. Like, the social media crowd is kind of propping us up, if I'm paraphrasing there. And I told him during that interview, I was like, hey, yeah, hand up, brother. That's we are part of that said social media crowd that is propping y'all up. But nonetheless, man, the thing that I love so much about Jackson Dart, we've talked about the defense a lot, we talked about the weapons a lot, and he's got a lot of them, which is another reason for optimism for him. He gets another year to be more fluent in this offense. And one of my great regrets is that we did not go watch Ole Miss play LSU when we were credentialed for that game. You know, it is what it is. Hindsight's 2020. But watching that game back, yes, LSU's defense left something to be desired. But with Jackson Dart being able to be another year more fluent in the language that is this offense, you could tell last year, man, he was in command. He knew where to go with the football. He knew the checks. He knew where he was going pre-snap. He knew if he got certain coverages where that football was supposed to go. And that was massive because his first year in Oxford, that wasn't how it looked. And so the progress he made from year 1 to year 2 was evident, but the jump he could make from 2 to 3, I think, is even more exciting. And he brought in Juice Wells to help him. I think Jordan Watkins might be one of the most slept-on wide receivers in the SEC, if not the country, period. Competitively now, we said this with Garrett Nussmeier, man. If you're a quarterback in the SEC, you got some juice to you. All right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be a QB1 in the most difficult conference in college football. But after being able to speak with him personally and just kind of get a gauge for what he's about, what you see is what you get with him, dude. Like, sometimes you'll see guys operate a certain way on game day, or maybe they try and present themselves a certain way, and it's a front. That's not Jackson Dart, dude. Like, he is about that life. You see the eye black, you see the headband, you see the cleats, you see all the swag. Like, that's him. That's how he operates. I'll tell you this, too. That is exactly how I want my quarterback to operate. That's exactly how I want my quarterback to dress when we are trying to break into the college football playoff if we're Ole Miss. So Jackson Dart, man, he's like that. He's got more weapons, and he is going to be another year better in the system. He's going to operate at another level, I think even a higher level than he did last year, which is saying something. He controls the tempo of this offense. He's going to push it pedal to the metal with more weapons in 2024 by the Jackson Dart hype. Darty season, all season out there in Oxford. Here's one that we haven't touched on in a little bit just because spring football came and went, and we talked about this a lot. But, like, I'd buy the hype on Ohio State wide receiver Jeremiah Smith. Let's not overthink this. Let's not. He's 6'3", 215 pounds. And it's one thing to hear guys like me sit behind a mic and tell you how good he is. He was the number 1 player for us in the class of 2024 here at On 3. He was a dude. Period, mic drop, the end. No way around it. It's another thing to hear coaches say, yeah, he's special now. You hear a lot of people say that. You hear the word special. You hear the word freak thrown around a lot with him when you talk to different people in the football world at a coach's level. But then you hear players talk about him. And when players talk about another player, like, let's really pay attention. Every single player that you've heard from Ohio State talk about Jeremiah Smith, it's not just like, yeah, he's a chance. It's like, no, he's different. He's a freak. Jack Sawyer said it the other day at SEC Media Days. Denzel Burke said it during the spring. Will Howard said it during the spring. These are individuals to where they don't need to juice up a young freshman. I promise you, dude, as an upperclassman, the last thing you really want to do is give too much credit to a true freshman that's been there all of 15 minutes in a few practices. Jeremiah Smith is like that. He's proven it multiple times behind closed doors. We've seen peaks via social media. Let's trust the buzz. Let's not overthink this. Jeremiah Smith, let's buy the hype on the young Buckeye wide receiver. He's got a chance to be the next great one. Now, speaking of hype, man, I don't know if there's been more hype around an individual. We mentioned the number 1 player in 2024. How about the number 1 player in 2023 for us here at On 3? Nico Iamaleava. The minute he committed to Tennessee, if you were a Tennessee fan, you're like, all right, this is it. This is our ticket to getting to the top of the mountain, to being back at Tennessee, to being what we have always wanted to be at Tennessee since, the late 90s. I think the ceiling with him is obvious. The ceiling with him is very obvious. You know what he has physically when it comes to pushing the ball downfield, and the way the ball jumps out of his hand. We all understand that. But I think what doesn't get talked about enough when you talk about the Nico Iamaleava hype, what about the floor? I think the floor for him is outrageously high. And the reason why I feel that way, look back at Joe Milton last year. Didn't have as many weapons. We've said that many times. Wasn't really a great ad-libber. That's not to say that Joe Milton wasn't a good athlete, but when things got a little bit hairy, he wasn't the guy to break, contain, get out of there, and probably pick up 7 yards for you, if not buy more time, keep his eyes downfield. That wasn't really his game. And even with both those things being the case last year for Tennessee, they still scored 30 points a game. You look at Nico and what he can do running the football, how good of an athlete he is. I think the bowl game against Iowa was a great idea of what we could get from him early on in his career. It's a really good defense. It's your first start. We're trying to figure out how we're going to push the ball downfield against this defense. No problem. Let's run the ball. Nico factors into that run game, runs for 3 touchdowns on the day. I think he's a good enough athlete to make it work until he totally figures out college football. Now, that's not me saying that he has to get away with bad habits, but I think you can help yourself being a good athlete at the quarterback position like Nico is. So I'd buy the hype on him because when that light bulb comes on, it's going to be fluorescent. It is going to be like your favorite neon sign at whatever convenience store you shop at. Like it will be very, very evident when the light bulb comes on for number 8. And until it completely does, the floor I think is still real high. I'd buy the hype on Nico Iamaleava. Let's go back to another freshman wide receiver, man. We said let's not overthink it with Jeremiah Smith. Let's trust our eyes with Cam Coleman over there at Auburn. We saw what he did in the A-Day. We did. Like there was a lot of hype around him during the spring too, and we went out and saw him during spring practice with our own eyes. He just looks different. He moves different. He operates different. 6'3", 200 pounds in the A-Day. Had that deep catch to start the game. Had another touchdown catch down the sideline. 92 yards, 1 touchdown in the A-Day. That'll do. That'll do. The fact that he got the spring to learn college. Not college football, to learn college. I'm telling you, that's massive for these young bucks early on to get some chemistry with Peyton Thorne and then also to get comfortable in the college football world as well. That's going to be massive for him. He's a star. Buy the hype on Cam Coleman. Trust your eyes. Don't overthink it. Whatever you want to say about Cam Coleman, everything you've heard to this point, it has been true. I'd buy the hype. He's going to factor in a big way in year 1 out there on the Plains. Now, Cam Ward, from one Cam to another. Cam Ward, man, we all know his physical tools. And if you're a Miami fan, you're banking very much so on him at quarterback being the reason why you win the ACC and make the college football playoff. I'd buy the hype around Cam Ward, not so much because of the physical tools, even though those are special, and that's a big reason why you get excited about him. How about what you've heard about him and what's being said in-house right now at Miami, just about who he is as a leader, as a temperature setter? Like, I get as excited as a college football fan about Cam Ward, the alpha at Miami, as much as I am the quarterback at Miami. Because when your quarterback isn't just QB1, he's the guy, that changes the entire complexion of your locker room. And I don't pretend to be in that locker room, but we've been able to communicate with some folks close to Miami, and they all say the same thing. It's not like there's a discrepancy from one guy to the next. They're all like, he's the alpha, he's the leader. That's contagious, man. That's very contagious. When you have a leader who's leading from the front at quarterback, sets you up for success. Also, in addition to the alpha mentality and in addition to the physical tools we mentioned, like, you hear a lot, too, about how cerebral he is. Like, I'll be very surprised if we don't see Cam Ward have a lot of freedom within this offense to check into what he wants to check into. Just my gut on things. Like, he's very, very football savvy. That's another thing you hear a lot about him. So that's one thing you'd worry about with a transfer quarterback, like I mentioned with other guys throughout different segments that we've done on this show. Can they acclimate to the new offense? Can they get up to speed? Are they able to digest a whole new playbook in the course of a spring leading into week 0, week 1, whenever they play their first game? Cam Ward is that guy. He is that guy. He's in control of the offense. The physical tools are one thing. I'd buy the hype because of all you hear about him as an alpha and all you hear about him being cerebral in running Miami's entire system. So get excited about that. Now, one more individual that I buy the hype in, and I want to be careful how we attack this next part of this segment. I buy the Dylan Raiola hype. I buy the Dylan Raiola hype in the sense that he is going to be more than capable to do what they ask him to do. Now, what are they going to ask him to do? Be efficient throwing the football downfield. And when there's money on the table, meaning we've run power 3 times in a row, We've got those safeties creeping up because they're tired of getting burned. A little play action, hand in the cookie jar, over the top, cash money, strike up the band, good times rolling in Lincoln. You can't miss those. Quite frankly, Nebraska, over the course of the last however many seasons, has not had that consistently. They have it now in 15. And so when I say buy the hype, there's some hype out there. In any hype store you go to, some hype is just a little bit irresponsible to purchase, right? It is. And there's some hype right now around Dylan Raiola in the most extreme part of any fan base. They're saying he's going to win the Heisman, he's going to be this, he's going to be that one in the Big Ten. Let's pump the brakes a little bit. He is the guy, though, to lead you to bowl eligibility and beyond. And I think also it's worth noting with Dylan Raiola, if he does the things I just mentioned well early on in the season, do not be surprised in the slightest if they start to give him a little bit more on his plate. Hey, Dylan, you handled that package well, you handled that look well, let's give you a little bit more freedom at the line. Hey, let's give you a little bit more freedom to check into what you want to check into. Hey, let's put a little bit more vertical pass game in there for you because he's got an arm that's special. That's pretty evident. We've all seen that. We've all seen him uncork it and just drop it in the bucket. We know that. But him being the guy at quarterback for them, being able to be the catalyst behind everything, that could be the next step for him, and that's where the hype train really, really gets pumping. But in terms of what you're going to ask of him this upcoming season, I think it's phenomenal. You got weapons around him better than you had previously. You got a run game that's going to be phenomenal, I believe, based on what they did last season and what they got coming back. You got a defense to support him. Like, he doesn't have to be the guy that leads the charge. He just has to play his role, be the cog in the machine, and as he progresses, put more on his plate, and Nebraska will be more than fine. So Jackson Dart, another year more polish in that system. Another year in that language class that is the Ole Miss offense. He's going to be good, man. Jeremiah Smith, let's not overthink it. He's 6'3", 215, and everyone that plays with him, not just coaches him, not just covers him, plays with him is like, yeah, he was developed in a lab. Nico Iamaleava, love the ceiling. The ceiling's obvious. How about the floor? The floor for him is way up here too. Cam Coleman, let's trust our eyes. We saw it in the A-Day. Let's not make it too difficult here. Cam Ward, same deal we said before with other quarterbacks. Physical tools are nice. That's the price of admission. But what he is as a leader at Miami and what he is when it comes to digesting this offense and leading this offense, that's what gets me really excited from a Kane fan. And then Dylan Raiola, yes, he's a true freshman. Don't put the weight of the world on his shoulders just yet, but he is definitely the guy to lead you to bowl eligibility. And as he progresses, you'll put more on his plate and things will become more and more exciting out there in Lincoln. So let me know on the socials, man, who we missed, or let me know who you are buying stock in, who you're buying hype in, and we appreciate you for that. Hey, a little caffeine here early on in the show before we jump into this next segment. Make sure you've liked the video. Just helps us do more of what you want to see, as we mentioned frequently. But quick caffeine break here, all right? So one sec. All right, we're back to it. Back at it like a bad habit. Big Ten Media Days are going on right now this week. Which is just exciting. I always say when media days are here, that means college football is about to be played, and that just fires us up. Ohio State, though, the conversation around them this year to me feels a little bit different. They always have the same goal, which is to win the Big Ten, to beat Michigan, to win the national championship. But I think it's interesting how many guys have come back to Ohio State, have chosen to come back to Ohio State, and are saying that out loud. Part of me is like, is that really the way that you want to approach this kind of pressure that you're putting on yourself? Because Denzel Burke is like, hey, I didn't come back for anything less than winning the national championship. I'm paraphrasing, that's what he said. Jack Sawyer, same deal. I believe other players have also said it's natty or bust. Like that is the approach for them. Okay? Now, me personally, I'm a very, very big believer in you take each day as it comes. You give your all to that day. You go 1-0. You focus on the process. And, like, when you look up at the end of however many weeks or months, then you say, okay, we accomplished our goal. Like, our goal here is to be the very best college football show in digital media. That is our goal. That is our goal, period, point blank, the end. But I don't come on here every single day and say, best college football show in digital media. That's us. Like, one, that doesn't really do anybody a lot of good to just say that's our goal. It's nice to have goals, but what we should do here, what we try to do, is focus on going in our lab, putting the best segments together we can, being as prepared as possible, building the best community possible, and just stacking days every single day. And so I'm not knocking what Ohio State's doing, but I am saying it does feel a little bit counterintuitive to what you've maybe come to expect from other great programs that have reached the mountaintop of college football. Like Nick Saban, Kirby Smart are the exact same way. You talk to them after a loss, and they're upset with what they did on the field. It's like, nope, wasn't good enough, wasn't the standard. We got to focus on us. We got to go 1-0 each day. We got to have a good week of practice before we talk about beating Ohio State, Alabama, I mean, whoever you want to talk about down the road for those teams. That's their approach. And so one part of me was like, I don't know if this is the way that you handle that kind of pressure. I don't know if that sits right with me totally the way that I was hoping it would sit for a team that's trying to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. But I think the more that I sit with it, yes, there's some danger in looking ahead and for feeling like you're looking ahead a little bit. But I think for Ohio State, the more that I digest this, the way they're approaching it, talking about, going natty or bust and all that, I think it's Ohio State more so embracing the pressure, embracing what's expected of them. And I think the reason why I'm okay with that is because all the external pressure that comes with being at Ohio State, one, I think they're used to. Two, the internal pressure at Ohio State, I believe makes it so the external pressure doesn't even matter. And what I mean by that is, like, if you're Denzel Burke, you had a chance to go pro. You had a chance to go make a whole lot of money, probably have a nice signing bonus. Like, I don't pretend to know exactly what his draft grade would have been or what would happen at the combine, but, like, he would be on an NFL roster right now. That is a fact. He decided to come back to Ohio State. For him, it's got to be personal. For him, it is personal. For him, he wants to go beat Michigan. For him, he wants to win a national championship. Like, a lot of goals. Look at that list for Denzel Burke that he more than likely set for himself when he got to Ohio State. There's a lot of unchecked boxes. And so for him, I could care less what J.D. Pickell at On 3 is saying about me, how much pressure we got on us. Like, we understand the pressure we have. We put pressure on our shoulders to go get this thing done. You write whatever you want about us. I mean, we'll say whatever we want at the podium, but understand everything that happens outside this building pales in comparison to the pressure that we put on ourselves internally. And so when I think about it that way and I start to lean more into that line of thinking for Ohio State, I'm like, okay, this is just Ohio State embracing their role. This is Ohio State understanding, like, we haven't done anything yet. We have a lot of talent, got a lot of dudes to where we should accomplish a lot, but we haven't done anything just yet. And so all that leads me to believe, like, this Ohio State team, man, it just feels a little bit different. It really does. And I know there's some part of it where it's like they're trying to get back to the mountaintop and they're kind of this underdog role. But, like, I mean, even just from, like, a chip on their shoulder perspective, like the edge perspective, like they are, I think, so comfortable talking about these things because they know what they have in-house. They know what they're supposed to do. Like Nick Saban last year at SEC Media Days, everyone's talking about Bama falling off and Bama not being Bama anymore. And, I mean, he was, like, cool as a cucumber when he talked to SEC Media Days. He was just so chill, almost concerningly so. You're like, hey, what does he know that we don't know? That might be the same thing that we could say about Ohio State right now. What do they know that we don't know right now? Because they're in that building. They're getting after it in the Woody Hayes every single day. That's it for them. That they are the only ones that can actually see what is going on within Ohio State's program. And so for them to be so comfortable saying these things out loud, some of it is probably a confidence thing. That's definitely true, and you're trying to probably project that to a degree. But at the same time, like, I think you say things confidently when you have a reason to feel confident about the things you say. Like, I don't think Denzel Burke is saying things like that. Jack Sawyer's not saying things like that. Will Howard's not saying things like that if they don't have a pretty good idea of them being able to back it up. Now, when we talk about how it's going to look different on the field, we referenced this a little bit earlier on in the show, but I really think that Ohio State, man, they're going to be bully mode. That is going to be who they are. Now, you ask the offensive line to make that happen for sure, but, like, they went out and got Quinshon Judkins for a reason. Trevion Henderson, he's still there. Will Howard, I think he's going to fit Chip Kelly's scheme perfectly, which I'm really excited to watch that take place on Saturdays. Previously, you've seen Ohio State be a quarterback, wide receiver-driven football team. Not saying there weren't really other exciting parts of that roster, but, like, that was typically, like, the headliners. Not just because they were the most visible, but because those were the guys that were, like, your top dogs. Think C.J. Stroud. Think Jackson Smith and Jigba. Think Marvin Harrison Jr. We go down the line here. We think about that for Ohio State. I'm not saying Will Howard isn't still a dude. I'm not saying Emeka Egbuka isn't still a dude. I talked about Jeremiah Smith. I think you should buy all the stock you can in that individual. But I think Ohio State, this upcoming season, will be a lot more complimentary. They will be run the football, play good defense. Ohio State fans are going to cringe when I say this, and so I apologize in advance. I think they're going to try and out Michigan this year. They've seen not only Michigan, but also Georgia win national championships that way. It starts up front. It starts with that physical edge. And what they have on defense speaks for itself. Like, you don't need me to tell you about JT Tuimoloau. You don't need me to tell you about Caleb Downs or Jack Sawyer. That's already there. That already exists. Now, though, I think they'll have the offense to bring a physical edge with that to really try and impose their will on some teams. And I'll say this too, that travels. More often than not, that lasts. That's good in bad weather. That is a very reliable way to win football games if you can make that your bread and butter. It's hard to do. It's why you don't see a lot of teams thrive the way that Michigan and Georgia and Alabama, I guess, in previous years have thrived doing it. But that is a sauce that is good for a very long time. One more thing I'll say here. You saw Ohio State do that at the end of last year. I said it on a previous video. There was a drive at the end of that Michigan game where Ohio State handed the ball to Travion Henderson multiple times in a row and just ran it down Michigan's throat. And that was a moment when I was watching that game during the broadcast. I was like, man, that's Ohio. That's what we've talked about all this past year for Ohio State. Their toughness being called into question, and are they physical enough? Like, on that drive, they proved we have this under the hood. I think this upcoming year will be an effort to multiply that effort and magnify that approach. I think that's going to be what they are. So going back to handling the pressure, they're leaning into it. The pressure externally pales in comparison to the pressure they feel internally, the pressure they put on themselves internally. Nobody wants to beat Michigan more than Ohio State, obviously. Nobody wants to win the national championship more than Ohio State based on what they've done the past couple of years. And so when that's the pressure you have on yourself, I'm okay with you saying it out loud. I have no issue with that. Because I think you can acknowledge the pressure and at the exact same time make it an emphasis on the work. So Ohio State's handling the pressure and talking their cash at media days, I'm cool with it. Do what you want to do, because I think when it's time for toe to meet leather and football to be played, they'll be ready. They'll be ready and they'll be there. Ohio State, they're going to be fun to watch, man. We got to find a way to get out to Columbus again at some point this year. We've been out there a few times. Got out there for the Penn State game last year. Got out there for the Michigan game the year before. Like, I think one of the coolest venues in college football, in my humble opinion. So I should have asked this earlier on in the show, but if you're watching right now, I'd be curious to hear from y'all. Get at me on the socials. Get at me on Twitter. Get at me wherever you do your social media. Probably Instagram or Twitter, one of those two, at JD Pickell. Let me know what you're doing while you watch this show, because, I mean, we understand now. A lot of y'all got life you're living. A lot of y'all throw the AirPods in and you'll clean the house or do laundry or you're at work or whatever you're doing. Just let us know how you listen and where you're listening and what you're doing while you listen, because that's a lot of fun. We got some really great responses when we've done this exercise in the past. And so thank you in advance for that. But let me know. I'll probably put this out on my social media channels as well. Let me know what you're doing while you listen to the Hard Count. We appreciate you for that, being a part of this program. Now, speaking of programs, y'all, Georgia's kind of boring. I mean, that's Georgia's a little bit boring, and that's not a knock on Georgia. If anything, that is a salute to Georgia. Like, this part of the year, we're all trying to pick apart every single roster, and we're all trying to pick apart different storylines, because football games are going to be played here in the not-too-distant future. And so we do our very best to inspect all these teams to the nth degree. And the more that you have wrong, or the more that you have on your roster that's interesting, we're going to talk about it. And you've noticed now, there's not a whole lot of people talking about Georgia. There's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. So what is the most interesting thing about Georgia right now? We'll talk about it in a second. But if you're watching right now as a one-off video, we cut these segments as one-off videos. So thank you for that. Make sure you're subscribed. If you're a Georgia fan watching this, shout out to y'all. We talk college football every single day, live 3 times a week. We have prediction week starting next week on the On3 YouTube channel. This show, The Hard Count, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern. Get locked in. It's ball and only ball. It's a good time. Want y'all a part of it. So we appreciate you in advance for locking in and subscribing to this channel. So as I said, one more time, Georgia, a little bit boring right now. Best coach in college football, not much to talk about there. Elite roster, not a ton to pick apart there. Arguably the best quarterback in college football. There's not a whole lot of negative things to say about a dude that completed north of 70% of his passes. Great defensive talent. They've won multiple national championships in the last 3 years, and they're the favorite this year to win the national championship. So what is the most interesting thing about Georgia in 2024? To me, I think the most interesting thing about the Dogs is what's in front of them. And what I mean by that is if they win the national championship in 2024, as they are favored to do, that'll be 3 national titles in 4 years. Right now, we talk about Smart and Saban, I think, in a way of, hey, Smart could eventually be where Saban is. Hey, Smart is trending towards where Saban is. If Kirby Smart wins 3 in 4 years, he is squarely in that conversation. Like, the gap to me closes substantially. And whether it's fair or not, the way that I assess it is I think what Kirby Smart is doing right now and how he's done it, like being able to do it in the portal era, in the NIL era, in the expanded playoff era, like I think we would evaluate Kirby Smart's national championships. I don't know if differently is the right word, but I do think you have to distinguish the eras a little bit. And that's not to knock Nick Saban or water down what he's done. But I do think a national championship this year, you start to talk about Kirby in that statue kind of conversation. And maybe he gets a statue regardless, but I think a good way to kind of put this in perspective, and I hate that we're going to do this way, but we have to do it. Dabo Swinney, I'm a big fan of. I think he's phenomenal. I would love to see Clemson get back on the horse in the ACC and be a factor in the college football playoff. That's how I feel. A couple of years ago, Dabo Swinney had won 2 national championships. And so you kind of start that discussion of, okay, well, where does Dabo Swinney factor into that conversation of where Nick Saban's at and where the great coaches in college football are at? Dabo Swinney still factors in, but notice, since those 2 national championships, the volume on that discussion, on Dabo Swinney's legacy, hasn't been watered down, but I do think the volume has been turned down a little bit when you comp a Swinney to a Saban. I'm not trying to dunk on Dabo Swinney. I'm trying to put in perspective Kirby Smart and his two national championships. Like, if he were to not have the success he's had over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, and, he just has these 2 national titles to his name, you say, okay, yeah, he's one of the best coaches in the sport for sure, but, like, is he in Saban? Is he in the Saban category? Is he in the Saban territory? My gut would say no. But let's go back to what I was saying. Let's say that they do win their 3rd in 4 years. I think it's also a pretty good statement on where college football is. So this segment applies to you if you're a fan of Georgia, if you're a fan of Tennessee, if you're a fan of Oklahoma, you're a fan of Texas, if you're a fan of Iowa. Like, I think Georgia winning another national championship would be a statement on where college football is, because think about how much the sport has changed and the game has changed, right? The portal is now a big factor. NIL is a big factor. Offenses are changing a lot. The carousel is wild. Georgia, to be honest with y'all, is pretty old school in a lot of ways. And not in a way of like they're being passed by the sport. But you notice now, Georgia, they do things a little bit differently. They're a very fundamental kind of operation. They're not super heavy on the portal. When it comes to NIL, from what I understand, they are more so hey, you get here and you ball, you get paid. We're not going to do this whole thing where we drop you 4 bags to come get you to commit to the G. Now, of course, I don't think they're irresponsible in how they operate on the NIL front when it comes to recruiting, but I am just saying, like, they are you have to earn what you get here. It's a little bit old school for the most part when it comes to how people are approaching NIL in some ways. Also, talk about, like, the way that they operate on the depth chart level. A lot of guys have to wait their turn. You could be a 4 or 5-star player, come to Georgia, brother, put this beanie on your helmet. You're running down on scout team for us. It's like, wait a second, I was All-American, I was 5-star this, I was 5-star that. And it's like, yeah, but we got 2 to 3 other 5-stars in front of you. And so to have to wait your turn, 1, it's coming more and more scarce these days. 2, it is a little bit, I think, of a testament to to Georgia's culture and development. Like, development is not something you hear talked about nearly as much these days because everyone's always switching teams. If Georgia wins another national title this year, they will have done it with 2 different quarterbacks who had to wait their turn, Stetson Bennett and Carson Beck. And I think you got to give a lot of credit to Kirby Smart for a number of reasons, but I think for the culture he's put in place and the way he's communicated with his players of like, if you trust us, if you trust our process, you trust the way that we do things, you're going to get yours. I know you want it right now. I know that's the world we're living in right now. It's all instant gratification, and Carson Beck said this when we sat down with him. Everybody wants everything at one click because you can right now. That's the world we're living in. You don't like where you're at, transfer. But if you trust us, you're going to achieve all that you want to do. This is a have one good year situation, and you're in the NFL and you're making a lot of money. Just trust us and have your one good year, ideally more, but you're going to be in good shape. And so if Georgia, going back to what we say here, if they win another national championship and they can continue to make that pitch of we do things different here, it's a little bit old school, I think that'd be a lot of validation for what has always worked in college football still working, which is you coach your players hard. Kirby Smart, man, you hear stories about him being on the megaphone at practice, being on the mic at practice and getting after players. Like, coaches are a little bit more hesitant to do that these days because they don't want their guy to transfer out. Kirby Smart's like, I don't care. We got 3 5-stars behind you. You want to leave? Leave. We're going to coach you hard here. And coaching hard, I believe, is a sign of love. That's another discussion for another time. Trenches. We've seen this be validated many times throughout the last couple of seasons in the college football world. But in the world of spread offenses like Georgia, yes, they do some spread concepts. They do some spread things. But I think who they are is unmistakable. They are a big person, move you up front kind of organization, both on offense and on defense. That still wins. That'd be more validation. Now, talk about the Georgia brand. If they win another national title, think about how much further that propels them. There's a couple of places at certain position groups that I think you have to make a compelling argument to tell me as to why you wouldn't go there if you're a high-level recruit. If Georgia wins another national championship, it's probably because the quarterback played great, probably because the wide receivers and the tight ends also did their job. Defense held up there into the bargain. Like, I'm looking down this list here of potential scenarios, and I cannot for the life of me figure out a reason why you would not pick Georgia. Now, this isn't me making a pitch to where if you're watching this and you're a recruit to go to Georgia, like, that's not what I'm saying here. What I am saying, though, is the pitch you can make if you're Kirby Smart and co., you got to give me a good reason why you fit better somewhere else. Because we have developed and helped guys get to the league and succeeded at the highest level now if they win another national championship at what feels like to me virtually every position. Now, wide receiver is probably a discussion that you would have after this season as to how they've developed those players, but I'm just trying to make sure we're on the same page here. Like, the brand and the reputation of Georgia to win a third in 4 years, it's already pretty sterling. I think it would be standard in 2024. Last thing I'll say, Saban's not in college football anymore. And Saban has been Kirby Smart's kryptonite. He's not there anymore. One less boss level for Kirby Smart to beat to get to where he wants to go. So what's the most interesting thing about a boring Georgia? They're so good, there's not a ton to pick apart. What they could do, what it would mean for the college football world if they were to win a third in 4 years. I think that's worth unpacking. And I think that would be a little bit diabolical for the rest of the landscape. So we'll see what happens there. Again, prediction week is next week. Make sure you're tuned in and subscribed so you don't miss it. All right, one more segment here before we get to y'all in the live chat, so make sure you have liked the video. Like the video, then submit your question to the live chat. Just a good practice, all right? A good give and take. We appreciate you for that. I don't know if it's a give and take. It's a give and give, if you will. So thank you for that. When the season ends, we all think we have a good gauge for what different teams are in the college football world. Then we go to the offseason. Then the portal hits. Then we have some time through spring football and after spring football. We go to media days, and we're kind of looking closer at some teams, watching some full game reruns. We really start to deep dive on some of these teams. And so I felt like it would be appropriate for us to talk about a few teams that during the course of this offseason have grown on me pretty substantially. I'm not telling you all these teams are going to be college football playoff teams or they're making a bowl game, but I do think that there's a couple of teams that need to be addressed here. Virginia Tech At first, you look at the ACC and you're like, JD, man, like, hey, Miami's going to be really good. Clemson, you can't count them out. Talk about Florida State. They're defending ACC champions. They feel like they have their best roster they've ever had in Tallahassee under Mike Norvell. I get that. That definitely takes some shine away from the folks out there in Blacksburg. But I will say this. They are the number one team in America in returning production in 2024. They finished hot. Won 5 of their last 7. No Florida State on the schedule. They get Miami at Miami, but they get them on a Friday night. Weird things happen on Friday nights, man. I'm just saying, weird things happen on Friday nights. We've seen that many a time. Then they get Clemson at home. You're telling me November 9th, Enter Sandman is blaring and you don't want to have a little bit of extra juice to you when Virginia Tech rolls in there? Welcoming Clemson to the crib? I don't know. I'm just saying that could be interesting. I think Virginia Tech could be that team that for all those reasons I just mentioned, we get to the end of the year and we're all like, how did we miss them? It was right in front of our face. They got a freaking Clydesdale and Kyron Drones playing quarterback for them at 6'2", 234 pounds. How did we miss them? They're growing on us. I would not be surprised if they were one of those sneak attack teams, caught a couple breaks, a couple things went right for them, and they ended up in the ACC title game. Keep an eye on them. I could see it. I could see it with Virginia Tech. Now, Alabama is a team that grew on me a lot this offseason. You're saying, JD, Alabama. You recognize that script A, right? Yes, I do. But here's the deal, man. When Nick Saban retired, I had what I would refer to and identify as a Nick Saban come down, which is very similar to those of y'all that are my caffeine addicts, which, I mean, hey, shout out to y'all. We stand together. Very similar to like a caffeine crash. You come off that high, that Nick Saban was the man at Alabama, the greatest of all time, and you're like, golly, how are they gonna recoup from this? Now started to question Kalen DeBoer. Never been in the SEC. Recruiting is one thing of itself, but I was like, how is this going to fit? Is he really, has he majored in the defensive side of the football with his previous teams? Not really. This is the SEC. They'll eat you alive for that. Hey, the offense doesn't really fit with Jalen Milroe. I don't know, man. Like, they threw the ball 40 times a game under Kalen DeBoer. Jalen Milroe, I don't know if you've seen him play football. He is a specimen. He's a good thrower of the football. He's not consistent. I don't know if that really fits too well here, my man. And then the offseason happened. And then what actually happened, to be real with y'all, is we took some time to go out to Tuscaloosa, and the good folks at Alabama were kind enough to give us some time with Kalen DeBoer, and we talked to him face-to-face. And being able to get a good gauge for what he's about, I think it started to hit me like, Kalen DeBoer is a really freaking smart football coach. Not that I didn't think he was to begin with, but I think being able to speak with him, you sort of realize, like, all right, guy's not in over his head. Is this the biggest job of his career? Absolutely. Is he in over his head? I don't think so. Like, people knock him for being too normal and not swearing at practice for whatever that means. I think that's his superpower. I think the fact that he's not totally, at least externally, engulfed in everything that Alabama is, like, I think that is honestly going to benefit him and hopefully anchor him when it comes to their success at Alabama. The defensive side of the ball, some young cats, still a lot of players that are really freaking good. We'll see what they are. But the offense, Kalen DeBoer, like I just said, really smart head coach. He's not going to have Jalen Milroe at quarterback and waste what he does as well as anyone or better than anyone else in the country. He's going to let him cook. And he's going to set him up for success. You've heard me say this, throwing the football more consistently as well. So I think Jalen Milroe will thrive at Alabama. And Alabama, the more I sat with it, the more I started to realize, like, okay, they're going to be more than fine. They're going to be more than fine. Mississippi State, this is a tricky one. Because you look at Vegas, and Mississippi State, man, like the over-under win total for them is 3.5. Getting to a bowl game is massively successful their first year out there for Jeff Lebby and Starkville. I don't know that I'm ready to call my shot for them being a bowl game team, but I will hammer that over. Now, to win a bowl game, or to get to a bowl game, rather, you got to steal Florida and Arkansas and win at Arizona State. Can you do that? If you can, I think you're bowling. But the draw for them is brutal. Like, you're at Texas, you're at Georgia, you're at Tennessee, you're at Ole Miss. Feels like they're at pretty much everyone that's difficult in the SEC. So, I mean, best of luck to Mississippi State. But the reason why they've grown on me so much throughout the course of this offseason, Jeff Lebby is not going to depend on talent to win football games. That's not knocking the roster. That's just how he gets down. And Blake Shapen said as much at SEC Media Days. He said, we're going to make you misaligned to where you're out of position. And when you're out of position, I don't care what kind of talent you have. This is me speaking now, not Blake Shapen. When you can't align correctly to us as an offense, that's candy from a baby. So we're winning not with brute force up front or with sheer talent. We're winning because we've won pre-snap. We've got you out of what you would like to be in. You're in a position to where we can now take advantage of you schematically. And to do that, I think he has one of the sneaky best portal additions at quarterback in Blake Shapen. Like I've told this story many times. I cannot get out of my mind him walking out there in Jerry World, biggest moment of his life, biggest moment of his career at least, and he's just dicing them up like hibachi. All over Oklahoma State, he was just throwing darts in that first half. Got hurt in the second half, but you hear what I'm saying. Stat line from that game for him was really impressive, and it was a big moment for him. He's built for this now. He is. It might take some time. You got to make sure he has some help on the perimeter and across the roster, period. But, like, Blake Shapen's a dude now. Do not get it twisted. So Mississippi State, can they make a bowl game? I feel a lot better about them making a bowl game than I did when this season, or this offseason rather, began after the national championship game. One more team to get to here. One more team from the ACC, previously of the AAC. The AAC defending national, I'll say defending national champions. The defending AAC champions, that is, the SMU Stangs. The more I look at it, the more I probably group them in with Va-Tech as being one of those sneak attack teams. The over-under for SMU, their first year in the ACC, is 8.5 wins. All right? They hit the portal hard, got 20-plus transfers, and they have a bona fide star at quarterback in Preston Stone. Now, Preston Stone is someone that I don't know the entire college football public knows about just yet, mostly because he played G5 football a season ago. But he is going to spin it in Rhett Lashley's offense for the second year now. Rhett Lashley, 2 years at SMU, they've averaged 37 points a game. All right, so they're going to score a lot of points. And to give you a little bit more confidence around Preston Stone, like he chose SMU over some other big-time offers. Like you look at his offer list over at on3.com, Alabama wanted him, Ohio State wanted him, Georgia wanted him. If you're good enough to go play quarterback at Georgia or be on the roster at Ohio State as a quarterback, like you're special. You got some juice. And so him in the ACC this upcoming season with the schedule they have, it's going to be nasty. I'm just saying, do not sleep on SMU. They have Florida State at home. That's it. No Miami, no Clemson, no Virginia Tech, no NC State. Like, if you're the ACC, it's like, how did you let them get away with this? How did you let them get away with this? I don't know, but SMU has grown a lot on me over the course of this offseason. They're one to watch in the ACC. So teams that have grown on me, Virginia Tech, I love Kyron Drones, man. Sign me up to be the president of his fan club. I like the schedule. I like the path. I love the momentum. Number one in returning production in all of college football. Va-Tech, man, keep an eye. Alabama, yes, I fell victim to the Saban come down. But the Kalen DeBoer come up, I think, is going to be phenomenal. Mississippi State could be a bowl team. I didn't feel that way before the season started. I'm a little bit more optimistic, though, as we approach week one. SMU got a quarterback, you got a chance, and they hit the portal hard. So SMU is going to be a factor in the ACC one way or another. Shouts to everyone watching live, man. Appreciate y'all being dialed in on a Wednesday morning. It's a good life talking college football with y'all, man. It is a good life, and we're grateful to live it. So making this whole thing go, man, is Nick Brake. Nick, kickball is typically a Wednesday night activity of yours.
Yes.
What is the forecast saying?
Well, look, there's rain here in Nashville, but it hasn't come. So who knows? We might get a game in tonight.
Holding off.
If so, we're playing a really good team. So don't get your hopes up, but we'll play hard.
Well, maybe the rain is messing with their psyche. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're going to get to game time and think they weren't going to play. And the next thing you know is bombs away, Nick Brake over deep left center. Hey, take your, what do they say? Round them.
Yeah.
Round the bases. That's you.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll do that. Just a thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Good thought. OG Gary always has a bunch of good thoughts in the chat. Do you think the Natty winner could be decided in the future by using EA Power Rankings? Meaning, if you were ranked by the top 10 in the EA preseason rankings, you won the Natty. Interesting logic, OG Gary.
You know, I think anytime you refer to a video game, people automatically like shut it down, like, there's no way. The folks at EA, though, for the most part, I understand their team rankings caught some heat, and deservedly so. But I do think the team rankings, for the most part, what they're trying to do is tell you what teams have on paper. So I don't know if it's like correlation is causation necessarily, but I do think that that gives us a good gauge, a ballpark kind of gauge, rather, for what the top tier teams are going to be in college football. So I don't really think that answers his question too well. The bottom line is the best players give you the best chance to win games. And with EA trying to determine who has the best players, it's probably a helpful variable. It's a helpful data point.
It's helpful.
Helpful.
Yeah. Ferris Khan, JD, 71% of Earth is covered by water. I point this out because I believe that Will Johnson can cover the rest. Am I a homer, or is he that good?
He's good, man. I think he's the best corner in college football, and I don't really think it's up for debate. He's special, man, and he is one of those guys they're going to ask to lead this defense. Lost a lot on that side of the ball. Lost a lot on both sides of the ball, to be real with y'all. But the fact that you still have him taking away the best receiver in the best receiver on the opposition for you every single college football Saturday, that's massive. That is a massive luxury to have if you're Wink Martindale, the new DC out there. So we'll see if the offense can answer the call to action, but I really believe the defense will be fine. I really do. I think they're going to be more than fine to put themselves right back in Big Ten title contention.
JD Craig says, what's your core memory of college football? Mine was riding in the combine with my dad during harvest and listening to the Huskers through the AM radio static in the 90s. Simpler time. That's obviously Craig's
That's a good one, man.
Core memory. That wouldn't be mine because I was only alive 3 months during the 90s.
Okay.
But that's a good take from Craig. What do you
90s
think, JD?
baby, though, still. You know?
I am.
You're
Yes.
a 90s kid.
Yes.
This is a great question. We probably should do a segment on this, to be real with y'all. The core memory I have is watching the USC-Texas national title game. And when that game was happening, I woke up for whatever reason, like sick as a dog, like had the flu, wasn't feeling good, like just was a shell of myself. But I remember I was thinking, if I can just get to tonight, if I can just get to this game kicking off, like I'll be able to just lock in, and that'll get me the rest of the way there. So that was probably my core memory, because the lead up to those games too, ESPN did such a great job promoting Vince Young versus Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart and how good is USC in the scope of college football history if they win this game. And so, like, the game itself, I think probably is the best college football game of all time, at least that I was alive for. And the promo leading up to it too was just, I don't know, just lives in my mind in the core memory department. So that to me is a core memory. That's my core memory.
Yeah, very nice. JD, my core memory was watching the Brom squad Louisville when Brian Brom was quarterback back in the day. I was a Louisville fan growing up because my dad went there, obviously.
I love
that.
Now
Hilltopper.
from you. I love that. The Brom squad, dude, that was fun.
Yes.
I remember that too. Yeah, heck yeah. I remember that.
Landon Fountain, we'll end on this. Ask 3 great questions. This is my favorite one because I do love giving G5 some praise. Any faith in a Sun Belt team making some noise this year?
That's a
There's
good
someone
question.
in the back who would think so.
I was gonna say, man, our guy Caden Smith, who
Can
we're
see
gonna do some work with him
over in the
he's
top
on
right corner.
He's on the national news desk, crushes it for us. He will be at this desk here in the not too distant future. A little spoiler alert. I could see App State making some noise. Coastal Carolina, feels like you never count them out. We need to probably do a little bit more work on this to speak definitively, but the answer I'm going to give here is yes. Which team it would be, we'll see. I believe there's a game early on in the year, and now I'm going to the schedule here. I believe Liberty plays App State. Let me make sure I'm correct in saying this here. If you're at the end of the show here, baby, this is just how we roll. We go live, we do it live, and we just talk some ball at the end of this thing. Yeah, so App State, they play Liberty at home in Kid Brewer Stadium. They got the Flames coming to town September 28th. That's a game that could have major G5 auto bid implications. So keep an eye on that one. We'll see. I like App State, though. We'll see what they are.
Cool. Well, Landon also asked what your favorite TV show was. Says that he watches Suits, which I know you like.
Suits is a hit, man. Do you have one, Nick? Because you are the film aficionado. I know you're not as big on TV, but do you have a favorite that you would put up here? Because I have a guess, but I want to see if I'm correct in my guess.
Yeah, my favorite's Seinfeld.
Yep.
I actually really like The Walking Dead, and then I love all of the, it's nerdy, but all the animated Star Wars shows.
It's not nerdy.
Well, objectively it is, but they're awesome. What about you, JD?
Man, that's Seinfeld's such a classic. I'm still going through Seinfeld slowly. The Office to me is just like it is the Georgia of the TV show world for me right now. The Office is there, but like also at the same time, dude, I loved Suits. I loved Breaking Bad. So I probably have to like put them into different segments, different conferences, if you will. In the comedy conference, I got The Office. In the serious conference, though, I'd probably go Breaking Bad. I don't know where Suits factors in because it feels different than Breaking Bad, but I feel like maybe they're in the same conference. I don't know. But those are my – I feel pretty good if those are my top three I'm rolling with. Suits, The Office, and Breaking Bad, not necessarily in that order.
Very good list.
Appreciate that. That means a lot coming from you. You don't just hand out the compliments when it comes to the television viewing.
I know I am brutal.
No, I like it though. You're honest. You're honest.
For Hurricane says Blacklist. Goat Dog says watching The Boys currently. Awesome, good stuff. JD, that's all I got.
Love it. Nick Brake making it happen here. Hey, we're gonna keep our fingers crossed here. We're gonna be hoping there's no rain for you tonight, so you can go yard a few more times and make history. I got the over for you, or the more rather, excuse me, on our Prize Picks total. Hey, appreciate y'all being down and making this show what it is, man. Genuinely so grateful for y'all tuning in. Genuinely appreciate y'all making the comment section jump and getting the algorithm going. Like, that's y'all. So we appreciate you for that. Appreciate y'all allowing us to do this for a job. It's absolutely hilarious and cannot thank you enough. We love y'all. We appreciate y'all. We are back on the air tomorrow for the biggest Thursday of the week. We're going to keep this party rolling. And we'll see y'all next time.